here. This is M. Chavez. You're on the sofa with M. Chavez and friends, and we do have Nadine in the studio today. She's talking about what she's experienced as a survivor of domestic violence and the difference between partner violence and domestic violence. So Nadine, please touch on home, because I touch home and be specific with that because you were mentioning your story. So please go, and I want the viewers to pay specific and close attention to what you're about to say.
All right, so I'm not sure that I'm understanding your question. Do you want me to continue with elaborating on domestic violence versus partner, or go into my story? I'm sorry.
No, go into your story, yes. I wanted to make sure that the people were paying close attention. No, your story, please.
Oh, okay. So, as I said, these social atrocities can affect anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, whether you're rich or poor, what your educational background is. These abuses cross all boundaries. They're also inflicted any time of the day or night, over breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that is how it was in my life, in my marriage. I got married at a young age. I was 18. During that time, it was accepted. Half of my family were all for it, looking forward to having the big wedding at home. And the other educated side of the family was like, no, you're too young. Why did I do it? I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't in a situation at home where I had to escape because, there were things going on there. No, I was living a very happy life. Why did I do that? I don't know. Maybe I found somebody that I wanted to, spend my time with. It's interesting because I had a wonderful childhood growing up, a lot of fun, but I never really had a boyfriend. I never felt the need to. So when I met my future husband on a visit to Philadelphia one summer, and I went back the following year with my grandmother. She met him, and then he came to Boston and stayed. I was 17, I was 15 when I met him, I was 17 when he came there, I was 18 when we got married. Once we got married, it was all downhill after that. And I have to say, it's not unusual for victims to experience partner abuse. It was partner at this time. He was my boyfriend, and he had already started putting his hands on me. I had never experienced that, so I used to fight back. I grew up in a small projects in Massachusetts. I was a little tough around the edges. I didn't have to fight every day. I had a wonderful childhood there, but the point is that I wasn't used to anybody putting their hands on me, so I fought back. But the danger in staying in a relationship like that is that after a while, you stop fighting back, but the abuser does not stop their abuse.
Wow. Okay, so you brought that home for me, because I would have never, first of all, I never, having experienced it as a victim or an abuser, I never knew there was a difference between the two that you mentioned, which was domestic and partner violence, that there's a difference between the two. Now I can clearly see. You said earlier, partner violence, obviously people are not living together, so it's probably not quite as frequent or as severe, or maybe a combination of both. Domestic violence, you're living with that person, and then my next question is, once you got maybe not married, but he was your boyfriend, did it begin immediately, or was it some time in between? Are you able to address that? Is this something that happens right away?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up. No. As your listeners heard in Jessica's interview, it's all good in the beginning. It is so good in the beginning. And in my marriage, the domestic violence, it was the same thing. In my partner violence with my boyfriend later, it was the same thing. You are the most important thing to them. They let it make you feel like you are the most important thing in their lives. I'm going to use an analogy that I cannot resist using, and that is in vampire horror movies, the vampire is always very charming and very hypnotic. But the vampire cannot come into your home unless they're invited.
Good analogy.
I use that analogy with domestic and partner violence. Once you open up the door to your heart and the door to your home to them, that evil becomes pervasive and overpowering in all different ways.
Interesting. The vampire scenario is awesome because I can clearly see, like, you know, in many of the movies we watched, if the so-called willing, vulnerable woman doesn't allow the vampire in, he's a gentleman. But once he enters in, then he takes over. Got you. Thank you for breaking it down. Okay, so then we'll ask this next question, and then we'll take a break and listen to some music before we continue on. How long were you in these relationships? And speaking of respond, we talked about responding. How did responding assist you? So my next question is, how long were you in these relationships, and how did you go to respond for help? Please answer that after our music break. So let's take a little music break right now. This is Teresa Griffin. This is Oh Me Oh My. Don't touch the dial. This is Nadine. She's with us, and she's breaking it down, explaining to us and educating us. So we'll be back right after this.
To make you lame, I would be a fool for you. Although the people turn to stay, I really don't care. I would give my everything to keep you, boy. It breaks my heart when you're not there. I'll stage a ballet on the tabletops, command performance. People will cry, cry. Yes, they will. And although I don't have a tune, my show ain't gon' fly. I'll find the music there in your eyes. Oh, me, oh my, I'm a fool for you. Oh, me, oh my,
Good morning, well, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, where you are in the country. I'm M. Chavez, and you're on the sofa with M. Chavez and friends. And we have Nadine in the studio with us, following up from an interview we had on Friday with Jessica Braden from Respond Inc. in Boston, Massachusetts, which is an agency that assists individuals that are victims of domestic violence. So back to our questioning with Nadine. Thank you for joining us. Now, Nadine, I did want to ask you a question, and my question is, what makes an abuser, what snaps in their head that makes them want to abuse? I mean, obviously we don't want to blame the victim, so putting the weight on the abuser, what makes them this loving guy or this loving woman? In many cases it's a man, though, this loving guy that was everything you could imagine, and then, as you mentioned, it was perfect, it was good. What sets it off in his head?
All right, thank you for asking that question. In my case, with my husband, to be honest with you, I have no idea. I never understood what we were fighting about, why he was putting his hands on me, and one of the things I used to always do if I didn't get out of the house was run to the bathroom. And that's where a lot of the abuse would happen, the hitting and slapping and stuff. The bathroom is one of the worst places in the home that a victim can run to because of the tub and the sink and the mirror that they can push your head into. Mm-hmm. The kitchen is the second worst place because of the weapons that are in the kitchen. But I, to this day, never knew. But what I did realize later, and the same in the case of my partnership, the first 8 months were beautiful. And then when he started flipping out, it would be over the most innocuous things and it would catch me so off guard that I would stand there like my eyes wide open, like, where is this coming from? In both cases, however, in reflection, I believe I have figured out the answer. In my husband's case, when I first met him, it must have been day 2. Just out of the clear blue sky, he told me that he hated his father, an ex-Marine.
Wow.
When I met his brother probably later that day or the following day, out of the clear blue sky, his brother said the same thing. I hate my father. Now, these were young men. My husband was around 19 and his brother was 18 at the time. So that was a big red flag right there. But by being over at their house a lot, I never saw it. However, I did notice that both of them kind of walked around like on eggshells, the way victims do. You walk around on eggshells, thinking that if you stay quiet or invisible, that they're not going to see and hurt you. That is so not the case.
Was he a victim?
What I realized in both cases, and what I would like your listeners to put their minds around, is that their issues really have nothing to do with you. They had nothing to do with me. In the case of my husband, whatever he grew up and went through, that's what he was acting out on. In the case of the boyfriend, the relationships that he had and ruined with other women and decisions that he made in his life, that's what his issues were all about. They had nothing to do with me. And in both cases, I was just the last straw in relationships that had gone bad, in things in their lives that had gone bad. And let me just say, in the case of my husband, he was more interested in me being his outlet from his home than anything else. And I realized that because he did tell me how he used to always go away in the summers to stay with his grandmother in South Carolina. He just happened to be there the summer that I was visiting my relatives who lived around the corner, and I was staying with them for a month. I was his scapegoat. That's why it didn't take him long to show his abusive side. But again, never knowing that myself, I thought, is this like it was a phase or something? Because I wasn't familiar with it. So let me just fight him back. But I was no match at 5'4" to someone who was 6'1", 195 pounds. And that's when you stop fighting back, when you realize the only way I'm going to stop this person from hurting me is to hurt him in a way that could take his life or get me arrested. And I couldn't see myself going down those paths, especially after having 3 children with that person.
Interesting. All right, well, let's do this. Let's, we have more questions. I wanted to ask you, though, before we take another music break, what was the impact and outcomes of these abusive relationships on your life?
They were extremely dramatic. So, do you want me to talk to you about it now before the music break, or?
No, you can. Yeah, you can go on and answer that, and then we'll take a break.
All right. The impacts were life-changing. My husband, our relationship was 10 years long, 1 year of dating, 9 years of marriage, and I did leave that relationship many, many times with my children, only to return because I had nowhere to stay long term. And at that time, in the early 70s, before 74, Respond had not been created yet. Later, in 1974, when Respond became the first domestic violence agency in Massachusetts and the second in the entire nation, I was already 2 years into my marriage, and Respond was a well-kept secret. The only way that you might hear about it is if you did go to a doctor or a hospital for your abuse or a social worker. At that time, I did go to the hospital emergency room a couple of times, but I was never, ever told about Respond. Instead, I used to go to the court system for help. And I would leave the court thinking, this judge, or they must be abusers too, because I have shown them the bruises on my body. I have told them about the abuse that is happening in front of my children. And yet, they let this man go the same day, no incarceration in jail, nothing. I was left to have to deal with this, and I also not only felt that they must be abusers themselves, but that they didn't care about me or my children, probably because we were people of color, and maybe because they thought, well, this is the life that you have chosen, this is the life that, don't see you having, you or your children, a better life, so there's nothing we can do. That has all changed.
Interesting. Wow. All right, we'll be on the other side. We have more questions. We'll continue our interview with Nadine right after Music Soul Child. Let's go.
I was told the true definition of a man was to never cry, work till you're tired, got to provide, always be the rock for my fam, protect them by all means, and give you the things that you need, baby. Our relationship is suffering, trying to give you what I never had. You say I don't know how to love you, babe. Well, I say show me the way. I keep my feelings deep inside, I channel them with my pride. I'm trying desperately, baby, just work with me. Show me the way to surrender my heart. Girl, I'm so lost. Yeah. Teach me how to love. Yeah. How I can get my emotions involved. Yeah. Teach me, show me how to love. Show me the way to surrender was taught to be strong. Never let them think you care at all. Let no one get close to me before you and me. I done shared things with you, girl, about my past that I'd never tell to anyone else. Just keep it to myself. Girl, I know I lack affection and expressing my feelings. It took me a minute to come and admit this, but see, I'm really trying to change now. Wanna love you better, show me how. I'm trying desperately, baby, please work with me. Show me the way to surrender my heart. Girl, I'm so lost. Yeah. Teach me how to love, how I can get my emotions involved. Yeah. Teach me, show me how to love. Show me the way to surrender my heart. Girl, I'm so lost. Teach me how to love, how I can get my emotions involved. Yeah. Teach me how to love. Ain't nobody ever took the time to try to teach me what love was but you. And I ain't never trust no one enough to let him tell me what to do. Teach me how to really show it in. Show me how to really love you, baby. Teach me, please just show me. Yeah. Cause I'm willing to let go of my fears. Girl, I'm serious about all that I say. Girl, I wanna love you with all of my heart. Baby, show me where to start. Teach me how to love. Show me the way to surrender my heart. Girl, I'm so lost. Teach me how to love, how I can get my emotions involved. Teach me, show me how.
Thank you for tuning in. We're back with Nadine on Urban Soul Grooves. You're on the sofa with M. Chavez and friends. And we've been having an upfront, candid conversation with Nadine, talking about past experiences of domestic violence. But more importantly, the difference between, we talked about the difference between partner abuse and domestic violence. We're going to continue our interview with Nadine and continue to be uplifted and encouraged and how to be proactive. So, on to, did you want to talk briefly about your children, how has this had an effect on either family, when we talk about family, outside resources of family who's wanting to intervene, or either your children? Did you want to talk anything about that?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for asking that question, because this fits right in with the impact. What was the impact and outcome of these dangerous relationships in my life and in the life of my children? My oldest child was 3. I'm sorry. My children ranged in ages from 2 to 6 years old. So I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. We had, my husband and I. My husband was very close with the 6-year-old, who was a daughter, and he used to talk with her, and this was unbeknown to me. This has all come out recently. He would talk to her and tell her how, he's sorry that he's hurting Mommy and that he needs to stop, and they would have conversations about other things too, I'm sure. I know that she had a bond with him. The thing that I want to let your listeners know, who are victims or who know people who are, it's important for victims to know that they need to talk to their children about what is happening. For me and other victims, we are so consumed by what is happening, why the abuse is happening. When the abuser leaves the home, the last thing really on our mind is to talk to our children about the abuse and how wrong it is. We're too busy trying to overcome the abuse, trying to mend the wounds that we might have on our body, trying to also do everything that we are responsible for doing in the home. with our children, taking care of the home, making dinner, shopping. We are so consumed by those things and how or how to get out of the situation that we don't think about sitting down with our older children who are old enough to know what's happening and saying, this is wrong, and I'm going to find a way for this to stop, for us to get out of it. So because in my case I wasn't doing that, my husband had my daughter's ear, and now many years later, my daughter is blaming me.
Wow.
We just had a big blowout about this. She is blaming me for his anger.
So you're talking about even many years later.
Down to her.
Many years later.
I'm sorry?
Many years later.
We're talking almost 40 years later. My oldest daughter is 43 years old, and it came out on Facebook because I was posting a lot of stuff about domestic violence, different aspects of it in my life, different things about domestic violence, because it is so pervasive in our society, and it's so pervasive around the world, that in this country, at least 1 out of 4 homes or individuals are affected by this directly as victims. And that doesn't even include the children that are being victimized because they're witnesses to it. But on the Facebook, my daughter's question was, how do you, and I'm not saying it verbatim, but in general she was posted, how can a person who was a child at the time, how can they avoid picking sides? And one of the responses from one of my friends on Facebook was that children can make a decision. Love is unconditional.
Right.
Love is unconditional. It is not conditional to the point where you have to accept what is happening to your mother in this case. And she went on to put in a post that she was 3 years old and being abused by her mother, and her father came and removed her from the home and took her to live with him. And she said to this day, she has not forgiven her mother. So love of your parents is conditional, but your child is not going to really know the difference unless you, as the victim, talk to them as well and not let the abuser have their ear.
That, and it's funny that you went there, because I was about to go there, and then because I was going to ask you, I'm pretty sure abusers want to feel like the victims as well. So they play the victim card in many situations, even in cases of molestation. The abusers play the victim card. And so I was going to ask you, because this interview, I think, is more personal than it is just in theory practical. It's more personal. I maybe even for you as someone who's experienced it, but even for me, simply because we all have even situations in our own families, and so when I hear you saying when parents try to protect their children, and sometimes we think when we don't tell them certain things, we're protecting them, but it is good to include them. Myself as a parent, I've been a parent. Now, my situation is different. I've raised my daughter, but I'm looking at, I look back on things that's from the past of protecting her from information. And in protecting her from information, the other parent uses that protected area that you as the so-called responsible parent try to do, and use that in coercing the child. And children don't have that avenue to make that distinction, because they are children and they equally love their parents. So I get it. And moving forward, go ahead, what were you going to say?
As far far as protecting your child as a victim, you're absolutely right on that score. However, if the child is witnessing it, then
you should talk
all
about it.
bets are off regarding protecting them.
I got you.
So, best thing to do is to talk with them when the abuser is not there and say to them, explain to them what is happening is wrong. I am going to get us out of this situation. I'm so sorry that you are witnessing this, but yes, you have to have their ear just like the abuser, because you can be sure that the abuser, they're not playing necessarily the victim card. What they're doing is they're trying to justify why they are doing this. And a child is not going to know, that what they're doing, that they're trying to justify it. They're going to feel bad for the parent, and they're going to look at the victim as the one, Mommy, why don't you, why are you asking Daddy to do anything? You know what I mean? Why are why are you upset that he's leaving? My daughter accused me of being upset whenever he would leave the home, and give him a hard time. I'm like, listen, I don't know where that came from, but in your young mind, maybe at one time or another, I asked him not to leave because there was something that he needed to do that was important, or maybe I needed to leave the house and do something that was important, but he decided that he's leaving. Because for the most part, I was very happy when he left. I never tried to stop him. I never even argued with him about anything, because I wanted him to leave so that there would be peace in the home.
Right.
But unless you talk to your children, they're not going to be able to make these types of distinctions. No. Now, getting back to the impact on my life, I was freed from this situation. Even though I had left many times, I returned home because I had nowhere to stay long-term with my children. There were 4 of us. My grandmother would let us stay in her one-bedroom apartment with her any and every time that I came. She never said no. My mother, when I would go to her home, 3 of my sisters shared a bedroom that they had to give up to me and my 3 children. I felt so sad about that, and I felt that it was wrong. So I had to go back home. And like I said, early on, there were no domestic violence agencies in Massachusetts until Respond came in 74. When Respond came, I never knew about them. They were a well-kept secret. Moving forward, so what happened was I and my children were freed after my husband's murder. We were staying at my mother's home because the home that we were renting caught fire. So we had to move into my mother's home. My husband left me for the first time ever after a week of being there because his abuse continued and my brothers were not having it. So he had to go. A week later, he was dead.
Wow.
And it was very painful for me. It felt like whatever love I had for him was being ripped out of my heart. But the hardest part for me was now we've got to call his parents and tell them. But worse than that, I had to tell my 6-year-old daughter that her father was dead.
Mm.
With the second relationship, well, let me just back up a little bit more. A lot of good came out of the ending of the first relationship because I immediately began rebuilding a life for me and my children. I let my oldest 2 go to Philadelphia with his parents after the burial. I kept my youngest child with me. I moved in with Muslim friends, and I began building. I went and got my oldest 2 children 2 months later, and had already secured a beautiful new home for us where we lived happily for 9 years. I got my driver's license and I drove to Philly with a girlfriend to pick up my children. I enrolled in college that September, and it took me 7 years to get my first degree, a bachelor's in English, but I did it, and I did it part-time because I never missed a beat with my family. The second time around in the partner relationship was extremely tragic. First of all, after 8 months of a relationship that was so good and so much fun and so much laughter, by the 8th month, it was hell. And because I knew what domestic violence felt and looked like, I knew that I wasn't going down that path again. The mistake that I made, however, was trying to handle the situation myself. And the reason why I tried to handle it myself, and I want to tell your listeners this as part of prevention, is that when you are in a new relationship, learn as much about it as you can. The reason why I tried to handle it was because this person knew where my mother lived, knew where my sister lived, knew where my daughter and granddaughter lived, because I brought him to these places. And because of that, I felt like I couldn't leave. I could have left and gone anywhere, but I felt that if I did, this person would go and hurt one of them to get back to me. Now, let's compound it by the fact that this person told me he was suicidal, which made me move even quicker to get out of this relationship. Add that onto the fact that if I were to leave and disappear and he went and hurt someone in my family, he might kill them and then kill himself. I could never live with that. Instead, I had to live with what happened. I also, once he told me he was suicidal, I said to myself, I've got to get out of this even faster because he might try to take me with him. Well, so that your listeners know how bad it got, that's exactly what he tried to do. He began stalking me when I left my home in the morning, and it was on one of those mornings that he got me. I have no recollection of it, and that's the good news. The bad news is that he shot me, and I will be blind for the rest of my life. I survived because the bullet went in under the left side of my chin, my jawline, and it came out through my right eye. That's the only reason why I'm alive. And I have no recollection of it, but from finding out that I was shot in my hallway, it tells me that I remember coming down the wide stairs in the hallway that led to one big wooden door. I opened that door, and that led to the outside door that had two big glass windows. He must have been standing there, and I must have seen him point the gun, and I must have turned my head to probably run. And that's how the bullet entered the way it did, and that's how it exited out of my right eye. And I will be blind for the rest of my life because I tried to handle this. But I feel justified because I can live with what happened to me. I can live as a blind person. But if he had hurt anybody that I had loved,
it would
be very difficult for me to live with that.
See, that is the caveat in a painful way of these type of situations of relationships, because here we have a situation where this individual not only threatens your life, when he was going to take his life, but now also is threatening the lives of people that are near and dear to you, your family. And so as an obligation, you feel, how do I protect my family? Because they're innocent when it comes to this situation. And he made good on a promise. So what happened to this individual, the perpetrator?
Well, as I said, he, oh no, I didn't tell you this. This was an attempted murder-suicide. I lived, he died.
Okay.
After he shot me and thought that I was dead, he sat on the steps of my brownstone building and took his own life.
Wow. So he really intended to make good on his promise.
Well, he never said that he was going, to kill me or himself. He did say that he was suicidal, but I knew, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, on top of him being abusive, he's suicidal? Right there, that tells me that this man might try to kill me and then kill himself. And that's exactly what happened. But also, as I had mentioned, after he told me that, and I decided to try to handle this myself, it's because him being suicidal, and if I disappeared and he couldn't get to me, he might go to someone I love and try to kill them and then sit down and kill himself. So I had to handle it myself. But I want your listeners to know that there are domestic violence agencies are in many, many cities now. They are no longer well-kept secrets, and they will help you find a way to plan your escape. And sometimes those escapes are very gradual because, as Jessica Braden said, they are some of the most dangerous times to leave. In my case is an example of that, because I refused to see him and he began stalking me. The next thing for him to do is, well, if I can't have you, and because I don't give a shit about my own life, I'm taking you with me. So making and planning your escape really takes the help of resources like domestic violence protection agencies. They're going to teach you things that you may not have even thought about, like hiding a set of car keys somewhere in case you have to, outside of the home, in case you have to make your escape and you can't get to your pocketbook where your car keys are. That's just one of many things that you're going to learn in making a gradual escape. However, if you're in a situation that is life and death, there are resources now through these agencies, through social workers, through police departments that are going to be resources to get you out of there and put you into temporary housing if it is a life and death situation. So please, I want your listeners to know that learn about these resources, because the life you save might be your own, but it may also be somebody else's life, a family member, a friend. So learn about these resources in case you ever need them or you ever need to refer them. And that's part of prevention, and then it becomes part of intervention. But I also want to talk a little bit about prevention and intervention and becoming a survivor, if that's okay.
Yeah, so, because we unfortunately have to come to an end. I could talk about this all day, but I wanted to just, I have a final question for you. As a result of these two dangerous journeys, what do you want listeners to take away from them when it comes to prevention, intervention, and becoming a survivor? What's your take?
Yes. Again, as far as prevention goes, there are so many things, but first and foremost, be your own best friend. Believe in yourself. Have confidence in yourself so that you feel complete and don't feel the need to have someone complete you. The next thing is, when you do find a partner, whether it's a man or a woman, learn as much as you can about them before committing to a long-term relationship with them. And part of that is listening to what they tell you about their lives, because you will learn a lot from their own mouths. I learned from this person that that he had been abusive to other women, but of course he made it sound like it was their fault. They were hitting him. I learned that he went to jail for hurting a girlfriend so badly that he literally threw her into a brick wall. But he made it sound like it was her fault because he wouldn't see her anymore, and she threw hot coffee in his face. So he reached out and threw her into a wall. So he went to jail for that. I also learned from him while he was in jail that restraining orders among many of the men who were there for that very reason are a joke, or were a joke at that time, and may still be a joke. If you listen to these things, you will see that there are red flags going off all over the place, that you should not allow yourself to justify what they have done in the past. And don't feel uncomfortable about asking them additional questions, because again, at the end of the day, the life you save might be your own. Find out what the resources are so that you can help yourself or help others. As far as becoming a survivor, you are only going to be a survivor if you love yourself enough to get out of that situation, that you love yourself enough to pay attention to what you're finding out about a person, so that you don't become a victim.
Wow. I really thank you. Obviously, we could go on and on and on, but I'm grateful to your interview. There's a movie, reminds me of it's actually entitled The Perfect Guy. I don't know if you've seen the movie.
Yes, I have, yep.
Yeah, and it just reminds me of a situation to where this woman was a great guy. She was at the top of her career. This man turned out to be a real lunatic, a real crazy nut who had a temper where he would, and what reminded me of that when you said he was in jail and these restraining orders, because I remember when she went to go get a restraining order, basically they were saying, what has he done? So in other words, if he hasn't done anything at this point, it's almost like you have to be victimized first before the restraining order is validated. It's not easy to get a restraining order, and once you get them, a restraining order is only as good as the person who decides to listen to it. You know, it doesn't really come with any advanced protection.
They think it's a joke, and many of them, they break those restraining orders. That's why the listeners have to realize that this is, I can't even explain how dangerous these situations are. So keep yourself safe by listening and not ignoring the red flags, and getting out of those types of relationships before you commit to them. Don't bring them around your close friends and family, because then you won't have any place to go to, because they'll know where those places are. Be your own best friend, your own, believe in yourself so that you don't need anybody to complete you. I have moved on and have done amazing things with my life, but I'm doing them as a blind person now. You don't have to end up the way that I have in that sense, that all of the great things that I'm doing and striving to do, I have to do them now without vision.
Wow.
So listen to the red flags, keep yourself safe, change your situation, become a survivor, so that you can have a life that you should have. And don't ever believe that it's your fault. Don't ever believe that this is your life, that you have deserved it on any level, in any way, shape, or form, because you grew up in a violent family, because you've been told that you cannot succeed in life. Don't ever believe that. That's why it's important for you to be your own best friend and to believe in yourself and to between you and your creator are the only two that you really need to make sure that you have a life and you are living a life that is true to who you are and who you should be and who you see yourself as being.
Well, we definitely want to give you a round of applause. We want to say thank you for taking the time to really educate us and fill us in and make it personal. It was a personal situation. We can clearly see that this was personal for you, and it became personal. I mean, we could your personal experience resonated with all of us. For more information on today's interview, please go to our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/Urban Soul Grooves with an S. Facebook.com/Urban Soul Grooves with an S. To not only hear today's interviews, but to also be actively involved in the wonderful things that Respond Inc. and Nadine are doing. You can also go to the Facebook page to make a pledge via the links. The links will be up for a pledge link for Nadine, also for Respond Inc., so you'll be able to see both, have access to both resources. The recordings will be available. The recordings for this will be available sometime today on both Facebook and the Urban Soul Grooves website. Nadine, we thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very, very much for this platform. And let me just say, the link for my pledge goes directly to Respond for the last 2 days of October being National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The pledges that come to my link go directly to Respond. And thank you very, very much.
You're welcome, and we definitely thank you for this time. So you're tuned in with M. Chavez on Urban Soul Grooves. Keep it locked. We appreciate you for taking time to just take all of this in. This was a lot to digest, but these are real life situations. And Respond Inc. is a real life company, a resource center. And there's resource centers no matter where you live. So thank you for being a part of this experience with us. We're going to continue on with more music. I'm M. Chavez. Keep it locked. Don't touch that dial.